I last left off with Susan Cain's quiet, the new groupthink, and the overemphasis on teamwork in the corporate environment and cooperative and small group learning in education. This phenomenon has been extensive enough throughout the years that employers have physically altered their employees' workspace, increasingly moving away from individual offices and spaces towards open office plans. To reiterate this in real-world terms, according to Cain, the amount of space per employee shrank from 500 square feet in the 1970s to 200 square feet in 2010. Examining this new groupthink in relation to productivity, Cain emphasizes the coding war games, a study conducted by software engineering consultants Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister, intended to map out the qualities of the best and worst computer programmers. When the results came in, they revealed an enormous performance gap. The best outperformed the worst by a 10-to-1 ratio. The top programmers were also about 2.5 times better than the median. When DeMarco and Lister tried to figure out what accounted for this astonishing range, the factors that you think would matter, such as years of experience, salary, even the time spent completing the work, had little correlation to outcome. It was a mystery, with one intriguing clue. Programmers from the same companies performed at more or less the same level, even though they hadn't worked together. That's because top performers overwhelmingly worked for companies that gave their workers the most privacy, personal space, control over their physical environments, and freedom from interruption. Now, DeMarco and Lister themselves did not draw the same broad conclusions as Cain, but this research was conducted in the 1970s and 80s. Pulling from more recent studies, she highlights other impacts of these open-plan offices. Open-plan offices have been found to reduce productivity and impair memory. They're associated with higher staff turnover. They make people sick, hostile, unmotivated, and insecure. Open-plan workers are more likely to suffer from high blood pressure and elevated stress levels and to get the flu. They argue more with their colleagues. They worry about coworkers eavesdropping on their phone calls and spying on their computer screens. They have fewer personal and confidential conversations with colleagues. They're often subject to loud and uncontrollable noise, which raises heart rates, releases cortisol, the body's fight or flight stress hormone, and makes people socially distant, quick to anger, aggressive, and slow to help others. For Cain, of course, this is nevertheless exclusively about extroversion versus introversion. Not allowing employees to have the solitude they need to be creative and innovative negatively impacts the introverts at the workplace. Because, of course, as Cain has already drawn the conclusion, it is the introverts who are the more creative and innovative employees. Again, this is the same woman who essentially blames the Great Recession of 2008 on extroverts. But what about the conformist nature of the corporate system? Even Cain labels the push for open-plan offices a part of the new groupthink. Even looking at the cultural history she provides, it is conformity to group thinking that enabled CEOs, college administrators, K-12 educators, and bureaucrats to dictate our values in the first place, such that the extrovert ideal took over. The clear picture we begin to see is that Americans long ago bought into the idea that these people had their and their children's best interest in mind. Perhaps think of it this way. If the top CEOs decide that they are going to embrace open-plan offices, what are you to do, even as the CEO of a smaller company in such an environment? If you are leading a standard, publicly traded company, you may very well find that your career could be in jeopardy if you do not simply fall in line with the current trends. Moving back to Cain's strengths, however, another area in which she manages to hit the mark is with her general suggestion that extroverts try to be more like introverts. As she argues, this may help the extrovert avoid the pitfalls of their high-risk, high-reward mindset. Similarly, she notes that introverts might want to try and be more like extroverts. As such, they may achieve some of the same general successes as extroverts. Although she incorporates plenty of reductionistic information while conveying these points, as she does elsewhere, this is a helpful line of thought, especially when trying to apply information from her book on a more personal rather than cultural level. The ultimate difference between extroversion and introversion, Cain explains, is the desire for different levels of stimulation. Extroverts wanting more, introverts less. Aware of that, she adds, you can begin to situate yourself to what level you can control, I would add, in environments that suit your personality. It is all about finding the optimal level of arousal, or about discovering what Cain labels sweet spots. Your sweet spot is the place where you're optimally stimulated. You probably seek it out already, without being aware that you're doing so. Imagine that you're lying contentedly in a hammock reading a great novel. This is a sweet spot, but after half an hour you realize that you've read the same sentence 5 times. Now you're understimulated, so you call a friend and go out for brunch. In other words, you ratchet up your stimulation level, and as you laugh and gossip over blueberry pancakes, you're back, thank goodness, inside your sweet spot. But this agreeable state lasts only until your friend, an extrovert, who needs much more stimulation than you do, persuades you to accompany her to a block party, where you're now confronted by loud music and a sea of strangers. But Cain also emphasizes the need to stretch beyond this sweet spot, as she writes, to the outer limits of your temperament, offering her own experience battling the fear of public speaking through desensitization training as an example. Such training, she says, allows you to expose yourself to what it is you are afraid of one step at a time, in manageable doses. As I would add, with emphasis, you cannot simply snap your fingers and change your personality, but you might just be able to stretch it out over time. The way you do this, Cain writes, especially for the introvert, is to engage with activities that you want to pursue for their own sake. Later, Cain ties this to the work of personality psychologist Brian Little and the concept of free trait theory. According to free trait theory, we are born and culturally endowed with certain personality traits. Introversion, for example, but we can and do act out of character in the service of core personal projects. In other words, introverts are capable of acting like extroverts for the sake of work they consider important, people they love, or anything they value highly. Free trait theory explains why an introvert might throw his extroverted wife a surprise party or join the PTA at his daughter's school. It explains how it's possible for an agreeable person to act hard-nosed during a business negotiation, and for a cantankerous uncle to treat his niece tenderly when he takes her out for ice cream. According to Little, our lives are dramatically enhanced when we're involved in core personal projects that we consider meaningful, manageable, and not unduly stressful, and that are supported by others. Perhaps this does not need high-minded theorization or academic study. It seems rather self-explanatory that we might act against our own personalities when it comes to the things that matter to us most. And again, however adequate or interesting Cain's points might occasionally be, they are consistently wrapped up with many inadequacies and inaccuracies. Take your points on self-monitoring and self-presentation. In relation to these processes of modifying your behavior and managing how others perceive you in order to meet social demands, Cain writes about psychological tricks for feeling calm and secure during intimidating situations, such as paying attention to how your face and body arrange themselves when you're feeling genuinely confident, and adopting those same positions when it comes time to fake it. Studies show that taking simple physical steps, like smiling, makes us feel stronger and happier, while frowning makes us feel worse. I have covered this topic previously, but it is worth repeating. Dale Carnegie also suggested this same approach to smiling in his How to Win Friends and Influence People, and although Cain herself does not even provide a citation here, it is clear what research she is referencing. It is about the facial feedback hypothesis. In the original study from 1988, Inhibiting and Facilitating Conditions of the Human Smile, Fritz Strack, Martin Leonard, and Sabine Strepper instructed participants to rate the funniness of cartoons while holding a pen in their mouth. When participants held the pen with their teeth, inducing a smile, they rated the cartoons as funnier than when they held the pen with their lips, inducing a pout. However overly specific the research methods, however laughable it is to take this and concluding that smiling makes you happy, the likes of Cain have nevertheless clutched onto this idea unquestioningly. After Cain published her book in 2012, 7 different laboratories, using 1,894 participants, failed to replicate this same study. Those results were published in Perspectives on Psychological Science in 2016. But, of course, some ideas will just not go away, and the topic has continued to be researched. The subtitle of the 2019 article, published in the Psychological Bulletin, a meta-analysis of the facial feedback literature, says it all. Effects of facial feedback on emotional experience are small and variable. The researchers found the effect to be small, but you still get a publication, Science Daily, reporting on the same article with the following headline: Psychologists find smiling really can make people happier. This is why psychology and psychological research can be so dangerous. Researchers and others will take away whatever conclusions they like from even the weakest of results. Drawing further parallels between Carnegie and Cain, Cain also references Shakespeare. Carnegie tries pushing the idea that happiness is just a matter of thought by pointing to Shakespeare. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Carnegie not only fails to understand the vengeful and violent context for these words are from Hamlet and the character of the same name, but he cannot even bring himself to finish the quote either. To me, it is a prison. John T. Cacioppo, co-founder of social neuroscience, tries to justify this exact perspective using the same quote in his book Loneliness, Human Nature and the Need for Social Connection. In a similar vein, Cain, in relation to her discussion of free trade theory, writes, "At first blush, free trade theory seems to run counter to a cherished piece of our cultural heritage. Shakespeare's oft-quoted advice, 'To thine own self be true,' runs deep in our philosophical DNA." In the case of either quote, this is not Shakespeare's advice. It should not be Shakespeare said, but rather, in this Shakespeare play, such and such character said. Or in this case, it should be emphasized that this advice, "To thine own self be true," comes from Polonius, also from Shakespeare's Hamlet. This is not some wise character, and, as the line in question appears alongside other meaningless platitudes, seems to suggest that such words are empty advice.
This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man.
By their continued reference to the wisdom of Shakespeare alone, ignoring the actual context of his work, such authors, writing in the guise of self-help, show their inability to reach any of the subtleties we need to navigate this complex and difficult culture. Even though Cain's work is more critical and offers several useful points, it is just as full of utter garbage. But I will leave it off there for now, picking back up next time, I believe, with another critically leaning self-help book on confidence. I hope to see you there.